Alicia, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
President of OEA, and Ben, if you want to fire away a few questions for her. Hey, how's today going so far? Clergy Day here at the Capitol. I know you have
fantastic. The Oklahoma Pastors for Kids has been a very supportive group throughout this. We love having a partnership with them.
Let me ask you, yesterday you guys came out with a poll showing that of likely voters in Oklahoma, I think it was 68% said that they supported the walkout, and it was a 10-point jump from last week. Talk about the public support and why that. I mean, your poll showed that the public is on your side, at least when it comes to voters. Why is that important?
So early media and legislators, even superintendent, were talking about this as a teacher pay raise. But for us, it was never just about the pay raise. That's an important aspect to keep teachers in the classroom here in Oklahoma, but it's about our kids. And so that message resonates with parents because we all want better for our students.
Is that something, as you think about how long this may go, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys you're prepared to go another week with permitting and logistics here at the Capitol. Teachers continue to say, we're in it for the long haul, we'll stay here for as long as it takes. But is there any concern on your part that, after a week, after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, for some parents that may say, hey, I support the teachers, but man, I got to get my kids in school. I mean, what are kind of your thoughts on the work you're trying to do here and juggling that with, potential risk of harm for students that are staying out of school?
Right. So student days will be made up. There are schools, like we got an email from our superintendent, because my daughter's in school, that said they'll make it up by doing this, this, and this when it's over. And so I think we are monitoring that. We're in constant contact with our local leaders who have the pulse and feel in their communities, and we'll address that if it comes to that. We saw movement in the legislature yesterday, and so that's positive for us. And so we just have a little bit more work to do.
Yeah, you talk about last night, teachers remained late into the evening as the House was meeting, continuing to chant and make their voices heard. Yeah. We saw the third-party sales tax, or internet sales tax, approved by the House. A lot of cheers when that vote went through, but then chants of we're coming back. So a step in the right direction. You said this right after the vote, hey, this is good work, but we need more. So my question is, what are we looking at here in terms of the dollar amount that it's going to take to provide that substantial boost to public education that you feel like would bring the walkout to an end?
Right. So we know 28% cuts over the last 10 years has created a huge hole in the education budget. And so we know that we're not going to be able to get back to that funding level in year one. So we have to have a pathway forward. We need the legislature to show us that they're committed to that pathway forward to getting us back to the funding from 2007, 2008, and beyond. Our teachers want more than a textbook a student. They need to be able to get those supplies that they need. We heard a teacher talk about doing an experiment with her students on mealworms, and the district couldn't even afford the mealworms to do the experiment, nor were any of her speakers working, so they gathered around and watched a silent video of someone else dissecting the mealworms. We can't have that.
And so the number you've asked for is $200 million originally to kind of make up for that decade
Correct.
Of lost funding. When you look at the textbook funding that was approved last week and about $18 million additional, the $20 million that's it's going to go into 2020. So you're getting up. You add that up, it's close to $100 million.
Right.
Of new funding for public education. How much more do you feel like it's gonna need? Because a lot of teachers and others are saying, all right, what's the end game here? What's the amount? If the legislature were to come out with a bill today that added another $50 million, would that be enough? Can you? Do you have an amount, a target?
Right, we're very close, but the reality is it has to pass all the steps. It needs to pass the Senate. We need ball and dice to pass the Senate. We need the Amazon tax bill to pass the Senate, and needed to be signed by the governor. And so we're really close. We had asked for $75 million in year one, and we're concerned still about the hotel motel tax being backed out. We're still concerned about when the gas tax and the cigarette tax go to other agencies. It leaves a hole in the funding for education for next year. So that's why we need to see a path forward and how they're going to address those things.
Alicia, I appreciate your time. Thanks for letting us ambush you here on the live feed.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Ben, interesting comments there, and I think that's the relevant question is, what's the end game, what's the goal line look like timeline-wise?
Yeah, I mean, just hearing, we still didn't hear a specific number on what it's going to take. Whether or not that's part of the strategy. I mean, the OEA, the teachers could be saying, hey, we want to get as much as we can right now before we start setting that. But
that's what you do in negotiations.
But a lot of lawmakers continue to say, all right, tell us what it's going to take. I mean, to be fair, the OEA did put out a very detailed list of demands last month when they first announced that the strike was coming. It was $800 million in new funding and $200 million of additional funding to public education. But like you said, when you start to add up the $33 million for textbooks, about $18 million that's going into the education budget general fund, if the sales tax, the internet third-party sales tax eventually goes through with the Senate and the governor, I mean, you're talking about another 20. So we're getting about halfway to what their original demands were, and it'll just be interesting to see if those things go through, what more they'll be asking for.
And the timeline of how fast they possibly go through.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, I think it's fair to say that last night's vote on the third-party sales tax probably does not happen without this demonstration here. The vote probably doesn't happen last night without this demonstration here, and there was an amendment added to it that earmarked it specifically for public education, and that may not go through if it wasn't for the presence of teachers here. So I think it's fair to say that they have made a difference when it comes to the legislative process here at the Capitol when you just look at votes on bills. But